Formula One may have stopped, but our fans and listeners are still looking for content to listen to. And today we have a real treat for you. Welcome back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. We are powered by the F1 Chronicle. Visit f1chronicle.com for news, reviews, and opinions on all things F1. Hosting today will be me, George Howson. And joining me today are motorsports fanatic Rees Evans.
Hi.
Engineering student Owain Medford.
Hello.
Sports journalist Mikael Kataja.
Hey.
Host of the Inside Line podcast, Kunal Shah.
Hi, guys.
And a very big welcome to our special guest, Head of Pirelli's Formula One operations, Mario Isola.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Oh, welcome. And it's a much bigger lobby than normal. I'm sure it's got nothing to do with you, Mario. I think people are just on TV. I'm sure that's it. But yes, this is, it's very interesting times at the moment in Formula One. Obviously, with the first 8 or so races being cancelled, Mario, or postponed. How has this affected Pirelli? I mean, obviously, you guys were ready to ship tyres around the world, but obviously they're not needed at the moment.
Yeah, talking about the tires, I have to say that the tires that we sent to Melbourne, unfortunately, we had to fit all the tires, and you know that when we strip the tires, they are no more usable. So these tires are wasted, basically. And while we had already the tires going to Bahrain, Vietnam, and China, actually, we have been able to stop the container before leaving the factory, while we are now working to have the container back to UK for the tires that we ship to Vietnam and Bahrain. Next steps, who knows what is going to happen, because we are planning, and we already received the allocation from the teams for at least 5 or 6 races. So we were in the process of producing other tires for the following races, but obviously now we need to wait and understand what happened with the calendar. Without a calendar, it's almost impossible to make any plan, even if we are trying to imagine any possible scenario and collecting any possible information. But there is nothing else we can do.
Yeah, it's a very unusual situation. It's simply never happened before, you know. Even in the old days, Formula One used to start in April or May, but we're looking at June if we're lucky at this rate. Now, I realise a lot of you guys have got questions for Mario. I think Owain, you had one that you listed in the chat. You want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah. Oh, I've completely forgotten it off the top of my head now. But I was just wondering. Actually, it was more to do with the what was going to be the 2021 spec tyres, but obviously that's been delayed to 2022. I was just wondering how your work on the compounds. I don't know if there'll be different compounds. Obviously, you have to re-engineer the tyre, I assume, for the 18-inch rims and the lower sidewall. I was just wondering, how does work on the compounds continue for you? Do you know?
Talking about 13 inches and 18 inches, we just learned that the decision is to continue on a product that basically we are not going to develop since mid of last year, because if you remember, we decided to stop the development of 13 inches tires in September 2019 and focus on 18 inches. That is a complete different project, different product. Now we have to understand, because it's the first time that we have to keep the same product for such a long period, for 3 years, while the cars are developing. So the performance of the cars, even in a situation where the technical regulation will be quite stable, but we know that the development is part of the DNA of Formula One, so we cannot pretend that we have teams stopping the development of the cars. So we are having discussions with teams and FIA and FOM to understand what to do in the next month. Obviously, if we have a calendar that is very compact in the second half of the season, it's difficult to find a room for testing. That means that also, if we have a plan to upgrade the current product, doesn't matter if we are talking about construction or compounds, we need to find a room for testing. it's impossible to validate a product without any track testing. So this is another important discussion that we are having with the teams, because obviously we need cars. We need to use cars that are provided by teams. That's the situation at the moment. With the current situation, the plan is to carry over the current tire construction and compounds for next year, but we need to understand which is the rate of development that is expected from the teams. So we will ask for updated simulations from the teams, because they are the only one who can provide this kind of data. And it's important for us to understand, first of all, which are the performance expected in 2021. It's a guess. It's difficult to have reliable and accurate simulations, but this is what we need, and then we will have internal meetings to understand if we have to develop something different or not. We are fully aware of the fact that we cannot make a plan with I don't know, 5-6 sessions of testing is impossible. So we need to face the real situation and try to find the most clever and sensible solution.
Oh, that's fair enough. I mean, because of the uncertainty around the sport, I mean, in terms of tyres going forward into, I know this year the tyres are meant to be the same as last year,
Yeah.
but going to 2021, even though the regulations aren't changing, do you think the tyres would be similar to what we've had before? Because quite frankly, I think you guys are doing an excellent job. You know, they are, as they should be. They're tough enough, but they also degrade to make a challenge for the drivers.
That's the point. Last year we focused our development on a new construction with a target to use it at a lower pressure, because the only tool that we have to react to an increase of performance at the moment is increasing the pressure. Increasing the pressure means that we have tires with higher degradation and more overheating. More overheating is something that drivers don't like. So they are asking for less degradation and less overheating. And obviously, if we don't upgrade the tire, this is impossible. So last year, we focused on that. But the new tire that we propose and we tested in Abu Dhabi had a different profile. And this has an impact on the part of the car, especially the back of the car, that is a very sensitive area. And the idea to modify the 2020 cars so late in the season was not something that teams didn't like. That's why the decision was to stay on the 2019 tires. And I can imagine that if we propose for next year a tire that is again with a different shape or a different profile, that means that it has an impact on the design of the cars. That could be an issue that we have to discuss and to understand together with the teams. So it's really difficult. Formula One is an environment where everybody is trying to plan everything. Each team has hundreds of engineers that are working to predict everything possible. And we are instead in a situation of unpredictability that is not normal in Formula One. So we need to find sometimes creative solutions. Italians are very good in creative solutions, I have to say. We will try to work together with teams and the FIA, obviously, to do the best what is possible, but is very difficult at the moment to predict what is going to happen. Also because we are assuming that the championship is going to start in June, but who knows if it's going to start in June.
Yeah, they're trying to predict you, you're trying to predict them. It's all kind of up in the air a bit. Kunal, I believe you've got a question for Mario.
Yes, Mario. First, I wanted to check, there was a Pirelli member who tested positive for the virus. I hope the member is doing well and recovering fine now.
Yes, he is well. He's back home. Yeah, he was tested positive. Luckily, we implemented since the beginning a number of actions and protocols inside the Pirelli team to avoid any spread of the virus, because we are like a team, but we are a bit different in the way that our people are in all the teams. Yeah. So the risk of being in contact with somebody with a virus was quite high because of the fact that our people is everywhere, and if any of our people was positive, and it happened that we had one member of the team positive to the coronavirus, the risk was to bring the virus to all the other teams. So that's why we were very careful since the beginning. For example, we split the fitters in two crews to work not all together in the fitting area, but only half of the people, to guarantee distances, to try to implement everything possible. Also in our hospitality, we segregated the areas of the working areas in order to keep people separate. If you remember, when we were in Barcelona at the second session, the problem was already in Italy, but not in the rest of Europe. So people were scared about any contact with Italian people, and we have half of the team that is coming from Italy and half of the team that is coming from UK, but also people that are coming from different areas, from France, Spain, and other places in Europe. That's why we paid a lot of attention to make everything possible to avoid contacts and to keep this inside. Limiting the number of people that are in contact.
That's an interesting insight, that you're a team where all your team members are part of different teams, and hence the risk of spreading it is pretty high. And I also wanted to ask you about those 1,800 tires that were scrapped and they were used as fuel for a cement factory. I think that's a good thing. At least they're being reused somewhere. But is that a standard procedure for unused tires for Pirelli?
It is for all the tires that we use in Formula 1, Formula 2, and Formula 3. Usually we have, after the race, we have also quite a big number of used tires that before going to the cement factory are analyzed, because the first step is to analyze the tires, especially after a race, because they are relevant for our R&D. And after that, we collect them and send them to UK, where we recycle the tires in this way. Obviously, we are also analyzing different ways to recycle the tires, because sustainability is a big topic for Formula 1 and for the future. Not only for Formula 1, for everybody, but Formula 1 is now paying a lot of attention on that. So we are happy to be part of a research group in order to reduce the carbon footprint in any of our phases of productions. From the material, that last year Pirelli won the Dow Jones Prize for Sustainability. So we already have a number of processes to pay attention to this topic. But in Formula 1, obviously, is also a good way to promote this. Sometimes motorsport is seen as people that are not looking after these important topics, but it's not like that. We are working around logistics, production, materials, how to recycle the tires and everything.
Yeah, Formula 1 in for carbon neutral. At the moment, unfortunately, they're achieving that, I'm sure. But yeah, sorry, Kunal, did I interrupt you there? Did you want to ask another question?
No. I'm happy to leave a few questions after others are done asking.
Fair enough. Mikael, do you want to ask something?
Yeah. I know we're queuing up for questions, so I'll just stack these two together. So, Mario, you mentioned the fact of having shipped tires to the Southeast Asian races already and having to turn them back. I was just interested about the manufacturing and shipping process. So how early, speculatively, if we would say that the races are going to start taking place at the end of June, how early would you need to know that in order of having a standard procedure of shipping the tires there and having everything set up? And also, just a second question, based on your how the coronavirus has affected your factory and HQ in Italy. I know you have a headquarters in Milan. So
yeah, So talking about the deadlines, we have a standard procedure that's also in the regulations that says 15 weeks before any overseas event, we have to select the 3 compounds, and then teams have 1 week. So that means 14 weeks before the event, we know what to produce, because this is the time we need to produce and ship the tires. Consider that we sea freight the tires. That's the best system, because we do that in thermocontrol containers. So we keep the tire at the right temperature, because you know that motorsport tires, for example, are very sensitive to cold temperature. That's why we use these thermocontrol containers. For European events, the deadlines are obviously not 15 and 14, but we are talking about 9 weeks and 8 weeks. That's the normal time. Then it is clear that when we have a new calendar, we will review all these deadlines in order to try to support as much as possible the possibility to have the events in the second half of the season. But obviously we need some time to produce and ship the tires. At the moment, as I said, we have already produced some tires for a number of events, so these tires are available, and it's just a shipment that is the time that we need, so much shorter compared to production and logistics, but we need a few weeks in any case. Hopefully we will have a draft calendar in maybe a couple of weeks or so. And talking about the production, we have factories everywhere in the world, but talking about motorsport, we produce tires in Romania, and we have another motorsport factory in Turkey that is a backup factory that can produce Formula One tires as well. And we produce the compounds in Italy. Obviously, at the moment, the Italian factory is closed because of the government decisions, as well as other factories around the world. And we have to understand what is going to happen with government decisions. We fully respect, obviously, no doubt on that.
Okay, thank you.
It's very interesting stuff. Rees, you got anything you want to ask?
First of all, thanks for giving the time up to come on the podcast. I was just wondering, I've heard a lot of drivers talk about when they get graining on the fronts, a lot of the time it cleans up, but on the rears, it often doesn't. I was just wondering why this is exactly.
But usually graining is due to cold conditions and sliding that obviously create this effect on the tires. On the front tire, probably you clean it because you have a lot more cornering angle, so you can clean it, or it depends also on the level of wear. Usually you clean the graining when the wear is quite high. That means that you don't see the graining anymore. And it happens more often on the front tires because graining means that you accelerate the wear. And if you start graining, typical is in Barcelona, the front left. That is in cold condition, is something that happens quite often. And that's why. But you have also graining on the rear tire that can be cleaned sometime. It's a function of the level of wear, I would say.
Yeah, I've got a question now. I mean, I'm not sure you'll be able to answer it, Mario, but so out of all the current drivers, because you obviously get data from all the teams, and I'm sure you have a general idea of how they are on the tires. Who would you say is the best driver on the tires at the current grid?
And that's a difficult question because we are talking about the 20 best drivers in the world. So honestly, to make a classification is not easy. What is important, I remember when in 2011 we came back to Formula One with a tire that was completely different compared to the previous one, and it was a clear request that came from Bernie Eccleston at that time. He told us, I want tires with high degradation because I need something to have a better show, more overtaking. I want something different, more pit stops and so on. So it was a strange request. You can understand that as a company that put a lot of resources and money to reduce degradation, to make tires that are lasting for a long time, having to produce tires with these characteristics was not, let's say, a normal request. But we did it. And for the drivers was a big shock because they had to drive a product that was completely different. And we have drivers that now are world champions many times that at the beginning were struggling with our product because it was different and they had to adapt their style, their driving style to the new tire. But because they are the best drivers, they are able to do that. And that's why drivers know exactly what they have to do. Obviously, it's not just the driver. It's a mix of driver, car, and how the car is designed, setup of the car, and also indications that are coming from the engineers. If we talk about overheating, for example, it's something that happens most of the time from the rear tires because of the traction. And obviously, the setup of the car, the ability of the driver not to overstress the rear tires in traction, and all these kind of stuff are something that can help in finding performance from the tires. When you have a sole supplier and all the tires are the same for everybody, you can make a difference in the way you use the tire. So it's a teamwork where engineers have to understand how to use the tires and drivers have to understand how to drive it, to adapt their driving style, to extract the maximum performance for a longer period. Then if we talk about qualifying, it's 1 lap. It doesn't matter. They can push on tire for 1 lap. It's the preparation lap that is really important and how they start the flying lap. But for the race, it's a completely different situation. And then you can see how drivers are able to adapt to this situation. And I know I didn't answer your question. So your question was who is the best, because I don't have an answer, because it's a mix of factors that you have to put together, and it's really difficult to make a classification on that.
Yeah, I noticed you sidestepped the answer to that. It's fine. I understand that. But I do know who you're referring to as well when you say a many times world champion who struggled at first, but now he knows what he's doing. I personally say Sergio Perez. I think he's incredible on the tires, but you know, it's all down to opinion.
You have a good memory. Yeah, exactly. No, it's true, because the other problem that we faced 2 years ago was, you remember in 2017 we developed the big tires, the wider tires, and it was a big change for Formula One. It was difficult for us because obviously we didn't have any representative car to test the tires on track, and so we decided to be a bit conservative the first year, obviously. And in 2017, most of the races were with only one pistol. And so not everybody, but a lot of organizers and FOM were complaining about this fact that with only one stop, races were not, the show was not really good, and they wanted more and more pistols. So we decided to change our approach. In 2018, we homologated, all the compounds were softer, and on top of that, most of the selections to many events were more aggressive. So we had the races with compounds 1 to 2 steps softer compared to 2017. And what happened? One stop again, because the teams were working a lot in managing the degradation, and they were asking the drivers to keep a certain race pace to achieve a one-stop strategy, because it's difficult to overtake, and because they save time reducing the number of stops, and they minimize the risk of mistake during the pit stop. So even if our approach was to have a lot more aggressive approach in terms of compounds, the result was not what we expected. So it's not easy. Also, if we agree together with FIA, teams, drivers, FOM, which are the targets for our tires in the future, then what we struggle to predict is the reaction of the teams on how they use the tires. And maybe we believe that, okay, we do like that, and for sure next year we have 2 to 3 stops, and then you realize that it's not true at all, because teams are just changing their approach.
Yeah. Anybody else got any questions, Owain?
Yeah, I have. I've got a couple. They're kind of 2 different sort of areas, but it's just following on from sort of what you've been talking about. I just wondered, sort of, in the early sort of years of you coming back to Formula One, so sort of 2011, 2012 sort of time, I noticed there was a lot of, obviously at that time, there was a lot of talk about the cliff, as it were, where obviously the tyres had high degradation and then would have a very, very dramatic fall off in grip. And we noticed a lot of the time you'd see drivers going backwards through the pack in the later stages of having tyres on for a large number of laps and just going backwards in the field. And at least the way I was seeing it, that seemed to lessen sort of as we came further and further through that sort of time. And I was just wondering if you thought the changes to drivers being able to get one-stop races rather than having this massive degradation problem that seemed to exist initially, would you say that would come from changes in your compounds or the team's ability to understand your compounds and work with them better with race pace and how they bring the tyres in and warm them up?
That's usually what happened, exactly. We start with a new product more or less every year, and there is a learning curve at the beginning of the season. It was clear, for example, last year when we had, if you remember, in Austria, there was also a vote to keep to go back to previous year product, because there is a learning curve where the teams are trying to understand as much as possible how the tires behave. And then they learn what to do. And obviously we try to develop something new in order to make their life a bit more difficult. That's what is going to happen. The cliff is still something that we are discussing, because the general direction now is to develop tires with less degradation and a lot less overheating, because this is what drivers don't like. So to have 2 or 3 stops, the only solution is to have a cliff at a certain point that is related to wear. But again, who can predict how good can be the teams to manage the cliff or to extend the tire life in order to avoid to reach the cliff? Maybe at the beginning will be difficult for them, and we will see races with 2 or 3 stops. Then they learn how to do, and for sure we go back to 1 stop or to a different situation that is difficult to predict now. That's that. I'm not complaining. It's something that is it's nice in Formula One to have this kind of continuous development. It's part of the technological development of everything, our tires, cars, and so on. Look at the performance of the cars now. We are as fast as, or even faster than cars in 2005, but the weight is 140 kilos more than 2005. 140 kilos, you know, that is 3 to 4 seconds per lap. So that means that if you compare cars with the same weight, these cars are probably 4 seconds quicker than 2005 cars. Are the fastest car ever in the story of Formula One. So, that means that also the energy that they are putting on the tires is huge. We try to make comparison with other championships. When a few years ago, we struggled to find cars for testing, and so we made investigations to understand if we can use different cars to test Formula One tires. It's impossible, simply because you don't have another championship that is stressing the tire at the same level than Formula One.
Kunal, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. And we spoke about compounds for 2020, 2021, and the whole mess that we are all in these unpredictable times. But one assumes that just reusing even the 2020 tires, in 2021, that wouldn't be a necessarily bad idea. Would it be so?
But that's a possibility. Clearly, that's a possibility. But we have to remember that the 2020 tires, the tires we have developed last year, have a different profile. That means that we oblige the teams to modify the floor and to modify some aero parts in the back of, especially in the back of the car, because the front tire is a bit more free. You have more space on the front tire, and that has an implication with the design of the cars. So if the reason why we carry over the 2020 cars to 2021 is to minimize the development of the car, obviously we have to consider also this.
Mikael, do you have a question?
Pirelli is
forward,
in Formula One, partially obviously for business reasons and for exposure, having people see the Pirelli name and associating that with speed. So tying into that, Mario, I would like to know your feelings on when you hear, for example, certain drivers complaining about their tires being gone and everything, because it is about exposure in the end, and people are realizing that Pirelli is associated with speed and F1, but then you have drivers who are like, my tires are gone and degradation and everything. So how do you feel that plays with the PR of Pirelli?
First of all, when you are the sole supplier, it's quite easy to criticize the sole supplier. No, it's something that
true.
I know since when I was involved in the World Rally Championship or the FIA GT or other championships. So it's not something new to me. Clearly, Pirelli is using Formula One as a marketing tool. It's a very powerful marketing tool. Actually, it's the only championship with this kind of power, and it's important that we try to keep the image of the company at a very high standard. Now I think that after 10 years, the image is quite linked. So if we talk to any people walking in the street and I say Pirelli, they associate the name to Formula One. That's a very important step. This is possible only on long-term projects, because after 2-3 years was not like that. Now it's possible. When we have a negative feedback, it's important that, as I always say to the drivers, I'm not worried about negative feedback or criticism, as long as it is useful for us to develop better tires. Criticism without any other target is not something that is productive, so it's useless. While if from any driver is coming a criticism that is an indication for us to do something better, that's positive. That's really positive. Then obviously people can think what they want, basically. But I think that it's important to keep this kind of approach. So we need to be open-minded to collect all the feedback from drivers, from the teams, from the spectators also, because we do this also for spectators. And if the championship is successful, our investment is successful. So it's important that we consider everything. Sometimes it's not easy, because obviously we have different requests from different stakeholders. And we try to put everything together in order to summarize, and because at the end of the day is only one product. We have one product that we have to supply to everybody. We cannot customize the product, one for spectators, one for the drivers.
Talking about the spectators, I just wanted to add, because you mentioned them as it came to mind. We remember from last season, we started having the small tire graphic appearing at the corner from AWS about the degradation and everything. Was that your just who kind of introduced the idea of adding that? Because there's been obviously a lot of, well, it divides people a lot on whether it's useful and whether they want that there. But did it come from from the F1 leadership or marketing team,
Yeah,
or yours?
it came from F1 together with AWS, and it's something interesting, but it's important. And obviously, we have discussed that together with them. It's important that we give the right information to the people and understandable information, because at the beginning, when I saw the image of the car with the 4 tires and the level of something, my perception was that was the level of wear. But it was not the level of wear. They made a model that is quite an accurate model, I have to say, trying to make an estimation of the performance life of the tire. That means that because they have data coming from the cars, they made an analysis and they try to predict the performance life in terms of percentage. It's difficult because if the driver, the assumption is based on what has happened during the race in the stint they consider. But if the driver, for any reason, is changing the race pace, for example, the performance life is changing. So if it's slowing down a little bit, it can make the tire survive for a longer period. So it is clear that if you have a driver with new tires and a driver with 30 laps old tires, that makes a difference, and probably it's difficult for the driver with old tires to keep the performance life for even a longer period. But it's important that we give the right information to the fans, because if you take the total of the Formula One fans, it is true that there is a big number that are not interested in technical stuff. They just look at Formula One overtaking and the best driver, and they are fan of a specific driver. But there are also a lot of fans that are interested in technical stuff, and we have to give them reliable information and accurate information, and they have to understand what we are saying. That's why we are trying to work together with FOM in order to have this kind of information that is improving and it's really clear for spectators. Sometimes it's difficult because with the graphic on TV, it's difficult to explain exactly what you are trying to tell them.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, really interesting stuff there. Rees, I'll give you the final question if you want to take it.
Yeah, I was just wondering which circuit or circuits present the greatest challenge when it comes to selecting the range of tyre compounds to take each year?
Selecting the range of compounds, now I believe that we have quite a good knowledge. The real challenge is when we have new circuits. Like, for example, this year, it was supposed to be Zandvoort and Vietnam, where we have very few information. In terms of severity on tires, obviously the circuits are Silverstone, Spa, Suzuka. Barcelona is now a bit less severe after the surface, because the asphalt is not as aggressive as it was in the past. Those three are the most severe for sure.
Kunal, I believe you have a pressing question.
Yes, this one's for you, Mario. There's a lot of free time we all have, and I wanted to know, what have you been up to in your free time? Any hobbies you're pursuing? Any things that you always wanted to do but didn't find time to do? Or if you're still driving around your ambulance, in these times.
I'm still doing that. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a period in which is quite necessary, I would say.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. That's I can say it's my hobby since a long time. Actually, it's 32 years that I'm doing that, since when I was 18. And I continue now. In the last couple of weeks, I was at home because it is better, considering that I I had 3 flights to come back from Melbourne. It's important to be sure that I'm in good condition. But tomorrow morning, 7 to 3, I will be in the call center to answer requests from people and additional information on this coronavirus. And then from next week, I will be back to the ambulance.
Has any journalist or fan recognized you and started asking you F1 questions in the call center? Or
Sorry?
When you go into the call center and, you know, a Formula One fan
no,
or
because
journalist.
nobody knows who I am. I'm a ghost, nobody knows.
Which call center is it? I mean, I might want to give them a little heads up about this.
There is, because of this emergency in each region in Italy, they made some special numbers, we call green numbers. I don't know if this is the right translation. Basically, when you call this number, you don't have to pay. Okay, they are emergency numbers where obviously because of the number of calls is huge. I have no idea of the numbers. The region, Lombardy, has asked to the association to send some volunteers to help answering to the request of the people. So we made a training to know what to answer, and then we can do that.
Well done to you as well for volunteering for that as well. We've heard of a lot of volunteers here in the UK as well. I'm sure a lot of other countries have had the same response to what's going on right now. It's horrible, but it's also bringing people together, which is beautiful to see.
Yeah.
But yes, that's all we really have time for. Thank you so much for giving you this time, Mario. Really do appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the nice
Mario.
Yes, and we have content coming up as well. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Pocket Casts, Omni Studio, all those good services. We will be having content even though F1 has stopped. And thank you so much everybody else for joining us too. Really do appreciate it. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you so much. And everybody stay safe and stay home, stay sensible. You know, we can all do our bit to help curb the progress of spread and of coronavirus around the world. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.